Hello everyone, and welcome to After Alexander. Episode 40, European Struggles. Last time, we covered the Second Syrian War and the peace deal that came with it. In today's episode, we're going to shift our focus west again to the European mainland. This is because, although Bevan wrote that we can't connect it to contemporary events due to scant sources, Antiochus II does bring Seleukid attention back to Europe during his reign. So, today, let's discuss Antiochus's intervention in Europe. First of all, let's turn to the 2 points mentioned by Bevan which I brought up at the end of last episode, before going on to discuss each one in more detail. The first of these points is that, at some stage, Byzantium and Antiochus were on the point of fighting. Heraclea sent over 40 trireme ships to Byzantium, so Bevan wrote that the Northern League, which we last covered during the rule of Antiochus I, seems to have still been around. Ultimately, the conflict didn't escalate any further than threats being exchanged between the two sides. Second, there is the fact that the Seleucids besieged the city of Kypsela. Antiochus II may have been backing the local Thracian nobility against the Gauls, whose arrival into the Hellenistic world we first introduced back in episode 24. Several of the Thracian nobles flocked to him, and he treated them well enough. In fact, the defenders of Kypsela submitted to him and offered to fight under Antiochus, after seeing the riches their countrymen were adorned in, with golden trinkets and weapons made of silver. So, that's the two events mentioned by Bevan as evidence for the Seleucids resurfacing in Europe during the rule of Antiochus II. With that out of the way, let's delve into the events in Europe in a bit more detail. The account of the splendour awarded to the Thracians under Antiochus II comes from Polyaenus. It has been concluded that Antiochus II is likely as not the ruler referred to rather than any of his namesakes, based on the sections before and after the recounting of this Thracian conflict. The Thracians, which formed a part of the Seleukid military and formed part of the attack on Kypsela, were led by two men by the names of Teres and Dromicetes. Similarly, Memnon is the source for the Byzantine conflict with the Seleukid Empire. Let's start with the affair with Byzantium. I should mention that there is the option that Memnon's account may refer to Antiochus II's son, who we first introduced by the name of Little Antiochus, instead, as he does end up in Thrace during his life. Now, there is no evidence for the idea that Antiochus II used force against the coastal cities. For example, his coins, usually ascribed a date of 250 to 225 BCE, were being made inside the city of Byzantium, contradicting the idea of a Seleukid siege. Coins struck there are mingled with those made in other Thracian cities such as Lysimachia or Odessos, and coinage depicting Antiochus II is centred on eastern Thrace. On the basis of evidence such as coins, it can be surmised that Antiochus II was in the region between 250 and 246 BCE. So, the coast was not the intended target of the campaign. Half a Missambrian decree found in Apollonia, which can be dated to between 260 and 250 BCE, mentions a defence agreement between the Seleucids and the city. Antiochus II is noted as having provided aid against Celts, but the fact that the text is incomplete doesn't help in deciphering the decree's meaning. Similarly, an inscription in marble found at Ilion, ranging from the latter 280s to the early 260s, documents an alliance between the city of Lysimachia, which we introduced back in episode 15, and either Antiochus I or Antiochus II. Specifically, the Seleukid king would be allowed to use the city's ports as a landing site in return for defending the city, pointing to the adversary being inland. Now, we don't know who Lysimachia's enemy was. However, we do get clues, such as the fact that Seuthopolis was destroyed in approximately 250 BCE, with the large constructions used for siege warfare being Hellenistic in nature. We also know that Kabyli's trade connections changed during the mid-200s BCE, but it isn't yet known whether this is related. For some geographic context, Seutopolis is roughly 2/3 of the way towards the Danube if you head north from the southern coast, while Messambria and Apollonia lie on the Black Sea coast, and Kabylie is to the east of Seutopolis. So, it is a possibility that whoever was in charge of Seutopolis at the time was the one threatening Lysimachia. Another option is that the city of Kypsela was the enemy in question, which would line up with the account by Polyenus. Kypsela was situated by the Hebrus River and to the northwest of Lysimachia, and is traditionally thought of as the seat of power for Thracian rulers, based on the coins being produced there. The city capitulated when Antiochus II laid siege to it and became his ally. Finally, there is the possibility that the leader of Seutopolis and Kypsela may have worked together in some fashion. So, to summarise, following the hypothesis put forward at the end of a 2013 paper on the subject. Antiochus II's interference in Thrace was possibly because of the tension between the interior and the Greek cities along the coast. He likely fought in Thrace as per his agreement with Lysimachia. The local rulers may have sided with him against his enemy in the interior as per the account of Polyenus. His principal target was whoever was leading Seutopolis at this point, and eliminating it as a threat allowed the cities in the southeast of Thrace to flourish, hence the grateful text from Apollonia. Although previously sources have apparently offered multiple dates for when this took place, coin evidence restricts the time period in the range of 250 to 246 BCE. With all of this said, the author notes that further work is still needed, and that the scarcity of evidence is limiting. The lack of knowledge about the invasions by the Celts, how many Thracian dynasties there were, and the aims of both Egypt and those seeking to take on the mantle of Lysimachus makes it difficult to get a handle on what's going on in the region. The campaigning of Antiochus II in Thrace has been compared to Ptolemy I in Palestine. It had been maintained that the territory was Seleukid several times throughout the dynasty's history. We've seen Seleucus I campaign in the region back in episode 15, as well as Antiochus I fighting in Europe and being forced to concede the Hellespont as the boundary in episode 23. Taken together, this was a reminder to other powers that any Seleukid claim to an area would not be given up. Macedon did not experience such Seleukid campaigning, but it was within the Seleukid sphere of influence given the repeated interdynastic marriages between the Seleukid and Antigonid dynasties. The peace after the Second Syrian War acted to neutralise the maritime power of Egypt, while the Lysimachian deal and Antiochus II's control of the Asian side of the Straits into Europe allowed him to access the Hellespont. Let's round out today's episode by zooming back out again and discussing manoeuvres between the major powers elsewhere. A treaty with the city of Litos on the island of Crete, which had been created in the days of Antiochus II's father, was renewed. Now, Litos lay next to the city of Itanos, which acted as a harbour for an Egyptian fleet. As such, this agreement with Litos acted to endanger the ships anchoring there. However, the region of Cyrenaica would leave the Seleukid orbit in 250 BCE, with the marriage of Demetrius the Fair and Berenike II, which we discussed in episode 38. This would ultimately culminate in the murder of Demetrius the Fair, dying in the arms of his lover Apama. In the wake of his death, Apama fell from favour and Berenike II was married off to the future Ptolemy III, meaning that the province which had seceded under Magas passed back into Egypt's possession. Neither Antiochus II nor Antigonus II did anything about it, and it has been described as Ptolemy II simply using his advantage and besting his two rivals diplomatically. With that, we've dealt with warfare in the west of the Seleukid Empire. However, the fact that Antiochus II has been focused on his western provinces means that the east has been somewhat neglected, as I've mentioned before. Next time, we'll circle back round to see what's been going on over in the east. Until then, thank you for listening. Feel free to get in touch at the show's email address for any questions or comments. Until next time, have a great week, everyone.